But I'm warning you, do not do too much of this. Do not stand there and just flop your horse's nose around from your foot to foot just because you can. The reason that I don't do that is because it disconnects the brain from the feet. Us here at Cappel Training and Shoeing. Today I'm going to talk to you about the bend, why I use it, and how I use it. You know, years ago Al Dunning told me, he said sometimes is a very good word to use when it comes to working with a horse. And you know, you've got to mix, do based on what you're feeling, based on what you're seeing, based on the attitude of the horse, and fit everything in. Matlock Rose, another great horseman, once said, it doesn't matter what you put on a horse, it's what you put it on that makes a difference. So the majority of what I try to do, and for those of you that have been watching my videos, have noticed that I'm talking a lot about straightness, and straightness to me is very, very important. You know, we've got to have that in order to get a horse to do anything. So what about the bend? The bend is something that I think is misunderstood, and you know, just because everybody else is doing it. Used to, you know, politics and religion were the only controversial subjects that you could find, but in today's access to so much information about horse training, you start talking about horse training of any kind, and you're going to fire up a way of thinking in this group of people, and none of them can seem to agree that the other group is doing anything of any benefit. So what I'm showing you here today is what I do and why I do it. I use the bend to give me body control. And the reason I mentioned that about Crow said about it doesn't matter what you put on a horse, to me that's very true. It's how you use it. It's how you feel of what you've got on. I've got a lot of bit on this horse this morning. It's a leverage bit, and it's got a lot of bite to it. Bit. So why would I have it on to show you an exercise, this bending exercise? I've got it on to show you that it's how it's being used. It's not the equipment itself. So the reason that I use a bend is to soften a horse at the pole, soften shoulder, working from behind. So just in front of the saddle that I'm thinking about setting the stage up to where if I'm using my inside leg, which is my left leg in this case, and I'm just encouraging this horse to go forward, up and around my inside here, that horse to look in the direction of travel. Keep going forward, soften your neck, look in the direction of travel. Now, I am very mindful about how he's bringing his face around. I don't want him to bring his nose first and have an ear tipped down on the outside. That's just avoidance. That's not a beneficial bend. So I'm going to use the outside rein in conjunction with my inside leg to help. Then I can place where I want it to be, circle, as I'm going around. I can bring it around all the way to my knee. And see, he stopped there, so this is why I do this. I didn't want him to stop. I want him to continue bringing his nose around, and he raised his nose up into my hand, which stopped his feet. Right now he's resisting me right here in the shoulder just a little bit. So this walking around a little more forward, a little more flexibility in the shoulder, a little more flexibility in that pole, a little more flexibility in that neck. Now, you see where his head's going right now. You see, he's starting to drop from right here. This is one reason why I don't do too much bending. If we do too much bending, we're going to get the horses lowering their head from right here. And you know, it takes a tremendous athlete of a horse to be able to lower his head from right there and still be able to do the things that we want them to do. I'm mindful of that, and that's why I do not do too much of this. I'm wanting this horse to stay lifted in the shoulders, lifted in the front end, and using his back end to pick himself up. I'm doing this to take the horse's power away and let me have some more body control and just get me a little softer feel when I take hold of his face when I go straight. I'm going to ask this horse to turn to the left here. This is part of how I come out of this turn. I want him to rock back on his hind end and move that left front foot right underneath that, and then walk out of that. Then I'm going to change direction. I'll set the stage up. Now I'm using my right foot right at the cinch. I'm asking this horse and continue walking straight. On the bit just a little bit there, my hands just stayed steady. I'm waiting for him to come off. When I feel his feet start to slow just a little bit more than I like, then I'm using that inside foot. Now look, when I go by the camera here, look where I'm setting. See, I'm setting to the outside of the horse's body. And I'm using right there to get, or to move that. It's just an opportunity to soften this horse. Soften him in the face, soften him in the neck, get more body control. Reason being is that so that when I turn him loose and go straight and I take a hold of him, then I get a response up in his face because of the bending. I expect him to go right. When I ask him to go left, I expect him to go left. And stuff. So the bend, that's the starting exercise I do. I call looking where you're going. Then I like to do what I call looking where you're bent, where I have him looking to the outside and stepping around. And see, he's mimicking what my upper body's doing. I'm looking off over here. I've got my shoulder to the inside. I've got my hip setting on the inside of his body, and he's going up into that. I can bring that nose and then I can go back to the looking where you're bent, and I can take him back to the this is looking where you're bent. The look. All I do is change my hand position and change which leg I'm using so that I'm getting body control between my legs. I'm getting softness in the face. I'm getting agreement from the horse. And this agreement turns into useful, willing, straight, with not as much argument. So when I've been riding a horse straight for a while, the reason that I go back to the bend is I'll go back to the bend to soften that jaw, soften that neck, soften that horse up, and get him thinking about responding. And so I go back to bending for a time. I'm not going to stay there either. I'm going to go there for a time until I regain that feel. Now, the reason that I switch back and forth so much is I ride horses. I ride qualities of horses. All horses are created equal. The really good horses make you think you're a horse trainer. They'll do things that is very difficult and make it seem very easy. The majority of the horses that we get to ride, most of us ride, are just average horses. So become a better horse, and that is to get more agreement from our legs and from our hands. And that's why that I will incorporate the bend. See right there when he raised up in, I didn't release right there when he opened his mouth. I just stayed there with it. I waited. And I'm not pulling on him any harder than it would take to. I couldn't break a weak rubber band with the amount of pressure that I'm pulling in his mouth. I'm very, very light. So what I've got in his mouth is relative to how I'm going to use my hands. If you know yourself and you know you're going to be pretty heavy-handed, you might be better off without a bit in his mouth at all, or at least go back to a straight one-to-one pull, so that the equipment that you have in you know what's going on with the equipment that you have. It's how you're using it. It's how the horse is responding to it. And if you're getting good results with what you have on the horse that you're riding, continue doing it. And there's nothing that says you have to do things in a certain way outside of the little cults that set up that dress a certain way and talk a certain way. This one can't see what this one's doing, so you're never going to please everybody. So learn to take the horse that you have and help that horse to become more agreeable with you by changing what you do. I mean, if you can ride them straight for a while and have them between the bridle reins and things are going, that's wonderful. But if you're running a snag, and you're not getting the results you want, then put a rein in each hand and go back. Should remind him of, this is kind of a safety net underneath your training program that you do. Maybe you've had your horse in a pressure situation and he's gotten a little bit about what you were doing, and he learned how to avoid you by bracing in his jaw and sticking his nose up. Then come back to soften him up. And this will really help you go a long ways when you turn him loose and start riding him straight again. So the reason that I bend the horse is to soften them, to give me more body control, so that when I'm riding them straight, then I can make straight be the most comfortable thing, and then it becomes, just the way I'm gonna sit up there and ride. So thank you very much. I think if you'll just when you're riding, start paying attention to the attitude of your horse when you're riding. And if your horse feels heavy on your hands, if your horse is feeling like that when you take a hold of him, he wants to root his nose up, then do some more, go back to your bending and stay with that bend until you get softness. But I'm warning you, do not do too much of this. Do not stand there and just flop your horse's nose around from your foot to foot just because you can. The reason that I don't do that is because it disconnects the brain from the feet. If I do take a horse's nose around, I want to be able to take him out of it by backing and coming over his hocks and walking on the other side onto a loose rein. So that's the reward that I give them, to keep them from becoming just a circus horse that flips his nose around your foot every time you touch an inside bridle rein. And that's what you have to be careful of with the bend. So straightness is the ultimate body condition, but I want to have the ability to separate every body part out down through his body, left and right, so that I can help this horse to do the things that I'm asking him to do anytime I want to without any resistance. So that's when I use the bend and why I use the bend. Thank you very much.